And today we're doing a podcast with co-founder Martin and myself, Trevor, and we are proud to introduce a shaman called Don Roberto, who travels the world with his ceremonies, and it's going to be a very interesting conversation, a very interesting talk. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Don. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Happy to be here. Happy to be in Liverpool. Happy to be connecting with some beautiful people again.
Fantastic. Yeah. You've been here a few days now. A couple of days. You arrived on Tuesday.
I did.
Yeah, and we've just hung out a little bit, haven't we?
We have, and I've just been acclimatizing because I've just come in from the Middle East, so there's about 4 hours difference, and it takes about an hour per day to recover.
Yeah. Well, the weather hasn't been too bad either, as well, has it?
Very similar to the Middle East, not.
How are you getting on, Trevor? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Been doing some work myself, and it's nice to have a couple of days break.
Yeah, you just drove up from Whitby, haven't you? Or drove across from Whitby today?
Yeah, I've got a gallery opening up there. A new career beckons, doing sacred art, which we'll probably touch on a little bit later. But looking forward to this conversation. A lot of questions.
A lot of questions. Well, it's mainly a talk about ayahuasca and what is ayahuasca, and this is why Don's here today, Don Roberto. He's in Liverpool at the moment. So tell us why you're in Liverpool, first and foremost, and then we can let the conversation roll from there.
I'm here in Liverpool to basically share the tradition once more. I was here last year, and it was the first time I'd connected with the community here, and it was very successful, and people got a lot out of it. But ayahuasca itself, well, people ask this question, and it's trending. It's becoming very prevalent in the kind of media and the news. It was in a recent Hollywood movie featured as part of the central platform. The movie was called Wanderlust, and there are a lot of stars like Sting. He's wrote about it in his autobiography, Broken Music. Tori Amos, Paul Simon, all these kind of people have talked about it and done it. And so it's actually happening around the world in many, many places, in Russia, in China, in the Middle East, in Peru, where it comes from, of course, in America, all across Europe. So it's becoming something that is, many people are talking about it, and many people are actually hearing about it from various sources, from the internet, from their friends. It seems to be, in the air.
It's a very much of a buzzword at the moment, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's definitely trending. And I looked at all the press, in the English press, from 1985 to about 1999, and it was definitely an upward curve of how often it was written about and mentioned. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely coming into the popular consciousness.
So tell us what it actually is.
It's not one thing, it's actually two things.
Okay.
The name ayahuasca comes from the vine itself. This is something that it exists in the Amazon forest. There's a vine, and that's called the ayahuasca vine, and it's used in combination with some leaves. And when you put the two together, you then have a very potent vehicle for healing and transformation. And the whole thing together is called ayahuasca. But so it's the ayahuasca vine and leaves that combine and are brewed together to make the kind of medicinal tea, if you like. So and you need one for the other, because how they work is that the actual vine, it helps to switch off certain enzymes in your tummy that enable the active component in the leaves to work and be absorbed by the body. So without that first component, it doesn't really work. Now, what's really interesting about this is that anthropologists have gone into the jungle and they said to these tribes, and they said, how is it you know how to combine these two plants? The thing is, in the Amazon, there are about 180,000 different plants. Now, the probability of combining any two of those plants successfully is 1 in 6 billion.
Wow.
1 in 6 billion. So if you had followed a standard scientific methodology of testing and bioassaying on your own person, whether this combination or that combination works, you probably wiped yourself out over and over multiple times. Probably 6 billion times you probably killed yourself. So what's really interesting is that the result given, the comment or the answer given by numerous tribes is very cryptic. Basically, they say the forest told us, or the jungle told us, or the plants told us. This idea that the nature itself can communicate directly and guide mankind as to say, well, this is the kind of plant you need to use for this illness, actually revealing the inner workings of the plants. And it seems to be the case that in the Amazon, nature itself was the medium to communicate directly to those tribes and say, put this and this together, and you have a superlative medicine, because this is actually called La Madre in the Amazon, the mother or the grandmother. It's a very respected and powerful medicine that trumps everything else, because it does open doorways into higher realms of knowing and very, very deep levels of healing.
Is it realms of consciousness, is it, Robert?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
It's definitely realms of consciousness, and it takes one beyond one's normal state of consciousness into realms that perhaps were not suspected of, possibilities of quantum possibilities of self, and actually it takes people very often into parallel realities or parallel universes, and these aren't things that are strange to us as contemporary people. Modern physicists talk about the possibility of there being higher dimensions. They talk about the possibility of there being other universes that coexist with us right now. And actually it's ironic, because here you have a so-called primitive peoples who have detailed knowledge of these realms and these dimensions, because they work with it for thousands of years. So on the one hand you have theoretical speculation, on the other hand you have using a very lo-fi technology, using bark and twigs and leaves, and they can access those realms.
Well, you say it's been getting used for thousands of years, and it's only really just coming into maybe the media quite pretty much of late. Maybe the past couple of years. I only heard about it a couple of years ago, and it is coming much more westernized, isn't it? But how long, maybe, how old is the medicine then, and how long is it being getting used for in the Amazon?
There's archaeological evidence to suggest that it's been used for 2,000 years or more.
Wow.
Just based on the basis that they found ceramics that have contained ayahuasca, and the West first encountered it with the geographer the botanist and geographer Richard Spruce in 1851, and he actually experienced it himself. And but it really picked up when people like William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg went to the Amazon. They were looking for the next thing, and they had really powerful experiences. What was interesting about they wrote their experiences up in a book called the Yahe letters. Yahe is the Colombian term for ayahuasca, and what's really interesting is it showed how unique and how intelligent this plant medicine is, because they both had very, very different experiences. William Burroughs was a hardened cynic, and he was, very just quite unpleasant. And Allen Ginsberg was actually much more mystical in orientation. He was much more forgiving. William Burroughs actually had very, very tough experiences that actually reflected beautifully his cynicism. And William Burroughs was introduced to this absolutely, cosmic plane, and his descriptions really were a reflection of what he was looking for and what he needed. So it was there right in the beginning of the Western contact. You have this demonstration of the intelligence that reflects the person itself that is the medicine is connected with.
Yeah. You mentioned intelligence there, that it has an intelligence in itself, and do you think that because of the diminishing rainforests and some of the places and shamanism in general, do you think that the actual intelligence is actually bringing this so that ayahuasca is becoming more prevalent in society and actually getting into the mainstream cultures now, where for many years it's been hidden, but now it's almost a necessity that it's kind of, to me, it sounds everywhere, maybe because I've experienced it. I talk to people about ayahuasca and they go, I've tried that, I know what this is, and it seems to be becoming more popular. Do you think it's important that this becomes more popular? Do you think it should be more accepted?
The brother of Terence McKenna, Dennis McKenna, who's an ethnobotanist, he actually has this idea that the medicine is coming out of the jungle. It's spreading primarily because it needs to take us to a different level. It's been contained within the Amazon, but now we're really going through an ecological crisis, an environmental crisis. Our economic systems are very precarious, if not built on a whole system of principles that actually don't have very much to do with nature itself. For example, the idea that you can have infinite growth, this whole assumption within economic models, when you watch the news, they're always talking about ongoing growth and as if it's something that's going to be eternal and sustainable, when actually it's not. We live on a planet with finite resources. We cannot treat it as if it's infinite. If we wanted to all to live to the standard the Germans or the Americans did, in fact, talking about every person on the planet living like that, we'd need something like 20, 30 Earths. We don't have these resources. But the consequences is that we're actually trashing the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And those people who believe that the planet has an intelligence, a native intelligence, and an awareness and a consciousness, that I'll quick to point out, this may explain why the medicine is spreading and touching and transforming those with whom it comes into contact.
Mm. So you're saying the earth is almost a living organism, and it's talking to us and it's telling us we need to change.
The earth is, yes. And in many ways, ayahuasca is the voice of nature.
Yeah.
Because once you come into contact with it, there's a definite transformation in consciousness and a connection to nature that is very, very profound.
Mm. So how did you come across it then, Robert?
I was not looking for it whatsoever. I was very happy with my life. I was actually deep into my photography at the time. And what had happened is that I had read about ayahuasca 20 years previous. I'd read a book by Michael Harner, who was an anthropologist, and he'd spent time in Ecuador with the Javara peoples. And they reluctantly, after much cajoling on his part, introduced him to ayahuasca. And what happened was that he had a whole series of phenomenal episodes in his journey, in his visual journey, and he went to the various dimensions, and he met various beings, and he had various conversations. The following morning, what was interesting is that the shaman came along and related everything that had happened to him with extraordinary precision. First you saw this, then you went here, and then you had this conversation, and then he related the dialogue. What was really killer when I read this is that the shaman was blind.
Wow.
So this is an anthropologist who's a serious scientist relating this story, and I'm reading this back in London thinking, my goodness, there must be something objective about what this process. If a blind shaman can see exactly what you went through and heard was there, almost eavesdropping on your conversations, then it has to be something real. But at the time I wasn't interested in necessarily going to Peru. It was too far, it was too expensive, it was too hot, too many mosquitoes, and I wasn't interested in perhaps chasing this weird experience. So I kind of clocked the name ayahuasca, but I shelved it. As it turns out, all those perceptions about Peru are true. It is too hot, it is too expensive to get there. There are too many mosquitoes. But 20 years then passed, and I was actually living in the Far East, teaching English as it happened. And then in 2007, there was a kind of knock on my virtual window, and there was a request for to be added as a friend. Somebody wanted to add me as their friend. Now, back in the day, if you liked a certain interest and somebody was local to you, they could find you. They could just list that interest, put the town or city, and they could find people who were equally interested. So I had put down shamanism as an interest. And so I looked at this person's interests, and they also had shamanism, but they also had ayahuasca. And it was the first time in 20 years that I'd seen this word. So I messaged them and I said, okay, so what's the story of ayahuasca? Well, how come you be interested in ayahuasca when it's a Peruvian plant? And he came back and he said, we have similar plants in this country that can do the same thing. I was like, what, really? Very interesting. So I added him as a friend. Now, the same week, I went to have lunch with somebody who was doing a doctorate in business studies. He was a pretty straight guy. We talked about music. We talked a bit about meditation. And a pretty nice conversation, pretty nice lunch. Now, at the end of that, he said, wait, don't go. I said, why? He said, I have something for you. He then reached into his briefcase and pulled out this jar of brown liquid. And it looked just like coffee. And I looked at him, I said, I don't drink coffee. And he said, this isn't coffee. This is ayahuasca. And I looked at him, I said, no, you cannot be serious. Really? I said, are you serious? He goes, yes, this is ayahuasca. And then I said, do you know this person? He said, the person who contacted me on Facebook. And he said, no, I don't. So I was like, okay, I hear, because I'm living on this small island, on the underbelly of China. And it's like, okay, I mean, what is the probability of twice in the same week, two people suddenly bringing this right in front of my focus, and I'm as far away from Peru as you can possibly get. So I said, okay, that's the sign for me.
It was a big calling for you.
Yeah, definitely. And then the first guy who originally contacted me again and say, hey, we're going to get together in a couple of weeks. We're going to drink. We're going to have a small ceremony. Would you like to participate? And I basically said, of course. And he told me, well, you've got to, follow a few preparation, guidelines and stop eating this and that and, really focus. And I was absolutely committed to this process. So I followed it to the letter. The day arrived, I had a stinking cold. I was like, you have to be joking. All the days, it was like horrible. It was all the days to be doing this. So what happened is we got together, a few words were said around the pot that contained the ayahuasca, and then I drank it, and it was really difficult to drink. It tasted like Chinese medicine. I don't know if any of your readers have ever had any Chinese medicine, but sometimes it's worse than the condition it's trying to cure when you drink it. So it was very unpleasant. And then my tummy started to grumble about 20 minutes later. I went outside and I purged in the flower bed. And then it was daytime actually, as it happens, and I looked around, and one of my friends, I looked at him, and his head was on fire. Like his head was on, there were virtual flames shooting out of his head, and I went, "Oh my goodness, this is very, very strong." And the energy that was actually beginning to emerge was very, very, very powerful, and I could barely stand up. Now, what they had done is that they had actually put tents in the garden, so if you wanted some private time, you could go into a tent. So I was basically obliged to go into the tent and lie down, and I closed my eyes, and suddenly the visions multiplied in strength like 100-fold, and I just went, oh my goodness, this is not recreational. The power behind it was not recreational. It's so serious. And I, as 20 years earlier, I had dabbled with LSD and magic mushrooms and stuff like that to explore and to discover, but I hadn't touched them since. And so I realized there was a qualitatively different level to this power and this energy. And like I just said, this is so not recreational. Boom, these morphing dynamic 360 IMAX level images were flowing before my eyes, and actually my body was going into this kind of spasms because the energy flowing through it was enormous. And so then what happened was very interesting, because I suddenly felt this presence. I felt that I was not alone. I felt that I was not alone inside my own body. I was like, oh, what's this? And I felt like it was this intelligence basically began to scan me from my tissue, but from my organs to my tissues to my cell to my DNA, just scanning straight down like a barcode, seeing who I was. And then I had this epiphany, and I went to myself, oh my God, I didn't just drink a liquid. I didn't just drink a chemical. I imbibed a living spirit, a living, intelligent, wise spirit in that liquid. And in a way, that was when my entire paradigm, my entire world shifted, because I had this realization that actually I know nothing. If this is true, and I could just feel this intelligent presence just waiting. And I realized that I was at ground zero of relearning what I've been taught. Because traditionally, we our propaganda to ourselves as a species is that we are the top of the apex of creation. That we have complex nervous systems. That we have huge brain capacity, and our technological accomplishments are there to be marveled at. And yet here am I, in the presence of something much greater than myself and much wiser than myself. And then I hear this ringing voice telepathically speaking to me, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And it basically said, let me show you what happens after you die.
Wow.
Now, I wasn't scared, because I just felt I was being kind of held by this presence. And then suddenly I was projected into this state of consciousness, and I could basically, it was the most, once the person transits the physical body and the physical domain, consciousness is untrammeled, it's free, it's expansive, it's huge. It was like wider than the widest sky. If you go to the States and you see these huge plains, it was wider than that. And what was really amazing was that I suddenly had this sensation of, oh my goodness, I remember this.
Yeah.
I remember this state of being free consciousness without boundaries, without limits. And it was almost like I've been here before.
Yeah.
And if I've been here before, how could I possibly have forgotten it? And it was this singular experience that basically made me realize that this was what I'd been searching for all my life. Mm-hmm. This level, this intensity, this direct knowledge, this remembering of something that had been haunting me, that I couldn't articulate. I suddenly realized that here, in this vehicle, is a medium to learn what I'd forgotten or to remember what I forgot.
Oh.
And that was the beginning of my journey with this medicine and dedication, because it was no mistake. It was the most powerful
Something
thing
really
I'd
special.
ever encountered.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think once you experience something like that shifts your paradigms, then you perhaps start looking at other areas of life and other people's existence and experiences that previously you might have said, well, that's a load of rubbish, and suddenly going, actually, that might be true, because if something like that is true, then anything could be true. Anything is possible. And so did you find yourself questioning everything, or did you just accept it for what it was? Was it an instant acceptance of the experience and saying, well, this is part, or did you try to rationalize it in any way? Or?
It's a good question. Did I try and rationalize it? By that, do you mean did I try and force it back into the paradigm I already knew?
Yeah.
No, I didn't do that. I was ready to be extremely open-minded and follow the process and learn from it as it revealed itself to me.
And do you think that, I mean, there'll be people that take ayahuasca and have no doubt experiences, but not as the same experience as you. It's different for everyone. Do you feel that this was your purpose and that ayahuasca was there to help guide you to do this work?
Personally, I feel that if I think it was a real attempt by the medicine to actually get my attention. If I'd had something that was very quiet and subtle, I wouldn't have been struck by its fullness and potentiality, and I might have just gone, that was interesting, or that was sweet, and I would have just gone on my way. But this was such a wake-up call for me. It was so in my face. It was no denying it.
How old were you at the time, Robert? And what were you doing in your life at that moment?
I was teaching English at university in the Far East, and I was in my early 40s. And that's basically. And I was actually questioning why. I was curious, like, why am I here? Yeah. Why am I here with all my educational accomplishments and not really? I was a bit stuck. I was thinking, why? Yeah. But I had to be in the right place
at the right time.
Because I wasn't going to look for this.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to search out for it. It came to me.
So do you feel like destiny played a big part in it? I mean, what is destiny, and do you believe in destiny?
I just think, let's just keep it at the right place, right time.
So what was next after you then? What journey did you go on with the medicine?
I essentially was really curious as to exploring these realms, because it had opened up this whole level of understanding and knowledge that I was just curious to go dive deep in. And so I began to on a regular, every 2 weeks, to actually journey. And the first few times I had a sitter who helped me through the experiences. And then I began to do more individual work, and I began to map the terrains and get familiar with navigating and exploring the potential of this sacrament or medicine. And then as I did that, more and more people started to say, can you sit for us? Can you watch over us as we journey? And in doing so, and the experiences that I then witnessed, I realized that this is extremely powerful work. Extremely, it's a work that needs training and needs respect, because you're ultimately dealing with healing someone's spirit.
Yeah.
Now that's a word that doesn't really come into the discourse of medicine very much, because you talk about the body or you talk about the mind. But this notion that spirit itself is something that needs tending and ministering in the sense of healing is something that's completely absent in contemporary discourse about medicine. Yet indigenous peoples, like those peoples that have shamanic traditions, are very aware that spirit is something that can get damaged and that does need interventions, that does need healing. So my experiences led me to realize that I needed deeper training. And this is a very profound medicine for the spirit, as well as a vehicle for being taught directly by the plants. Of course. Yes, but it really needed respect, and it really needed to be trained. I needed training, so I then began to take it further and went to the Amazon to learn. Yeah,
did you feel like the Amazon was your calling? Is that where you needed to go for your training?
It was my calling for professional reasons, but in terms of feeding the mosquitoes, I really didn't feel I was called there.
You say you just went to the Amazon. How did you just go to the Amazon? Do you look a shaman up somewhere, or is someone?
Again, it's one of those things. It was word of mouth. If I can recap and tell you what was happening. I had had a few experiences where I was looking after people, and they went into profound experiences where they were being rebooted in terms of their whole nervous system was being rebooted. Now, what that means is that they were just basically not entirely there in the room in terms of their consciousness, and I had to basically make sure they didn't hurt themselves by flailing or thrashing around. And I thought to myself, look, there's got to be a better way to handle the space. I really need to take it to the next level. So I asked one of my friends who'd actually sat with a Peruvian shaman many times, and she was living in a neighboring city. I said, can you teach me these things called Icaros? I'd heard that there were songs that accompanied the medicine, and they were vital to the ceremony, but I thought that you had to be downloaded with them, and that hadn't happened to me, which is why I didn't sing them. Yeah. But I thought, this is the time now. I need to learn some new skills in order to better handle the space. And she said, I could, but there's a guy in Japan right now who's much better than me. Why don't you write to him and ask him to come over? So I wrote to him and I said, look, I'd like to learn the song, the Icaros. I've heard they're very powerful in shaping the experience. Would you be willing to come over? So he agreed. I said, I'll pay for your plane ticket and all that. I'll pay for your tuition. He came over and he began to work. And it was at that point when he began to sing that the medicine became just much more active and much more powerful and much more focused. And I realized that was the missing component. And then the experiences were amazing. And then he said to me, look, if you think I'm good, because I was singing his praises, he said, if you think I'm good, you need to connect with my teacher.
Wow.
And she goes to Costa Rica. She's Peruvian, but she goes to Costa Rica. So a couple of months later, I get an invitation from the place that she worked at, and it was a no-brainer. I was like, okay, dates, here's the money, let's do it. I went there.
I suppose this was a very exciting time for you in your
life.
It was
amazing. I had no idea what I was walking into, because actually, even though I was working with an analog of ayahuasca, I was working with local plants. I hadn't encountered it directly, the Peruvian version. And so I was very excited. We were in the cloud level of the mountains, and a beautiful surrounding. And then nightfall came. We prepared. We were wearing white, all of us. There were about 30 of us in that round hut that they call a maloca. And so she comes in, very modest, small woman, about 35, and then she begins to hum. She begins to whistle. And then I'm lying there listening to the whistling, thinking, how is it possible that in her whistling I can hear the entire jungle soundscape coming from her whistling? Every single insects, birds, everything is there. I was like, wow, that's pretty serious. And then she began to hum. And okay, so we had already drunk and it was beginning to settle in. She began to hum. And as soon as she shifted from whistling to humming, the air just went... And there were all these hummingbirds, virtual hummingbirds, just suspended, like hundreds of them in the air. And I was like, oh my God, this is a whole different level, right? A whole different level. And then she began to sing properly. And when she did that, I had this wrenching feeling in my stomach. And all this masses of childhood stuff came up. And I crawled out of that maloca, tears streaming down my face, apologizing to the medicine. Going, because I kind of like had hubris. I was like, I've done this 50 times. I can surf this experience. It's probably just the same. No, this is a whole different level. And I was like, on my knees, hands and knees, crawling out, tears streaming down my cheeks. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was this sick, because it was suddenly right. You've done some good work. Let's roll our sleeves up and go deeper. Let's really look at some stuff. So I spent a whole of that first ceremony in Costa Rica just dealing with what I never even knew I was carrying.
Wow,
that was how profound it was.
So was the strength of the experience because of the actual ayahuasca vine there is different, or do you think it's to do with the environment, or do you think it was to do with the actual, perhaps the person who was holding the space, or the ayahuasca itself?
It's a little combination of all of those things. Firstly, this woman's connection to the plants is extremely strong, and it's at this point I need to explain what level we're working with. Every culture has a relationship with plants in terms of basic medications. If you hurt your leg, you can mix some herbs together and apply it, and then Western medicine takes this further and says this is the active ingredient. Let's make our medicine from this active ingredient, the chemical nature. But in the Amazon, there's a notion that everything is alive. Everything is alive, everything has spirit. And all plants have spirits. They have an awareness and a consciousness of their own. And actually science is beginning to show that they're hyper aware in real time of what's around them, and they shape their environment accordingly. But what the Amazonian Indians say is that there's this intelligence that is really quite extraordinary behind a lot of the plants. Now, many plants just want to do plant things, and they're not interested in human beings. But some plants are willing to bridge the gap between the plant kingdom and the human kingdom, and actually work to directly heal us and to teach us. And these are called master plant spirit teachers, because it's the spirit of that plant that is willing to teach. Now, we know some of these. We know magic mushrooms, San Pedro or peyote. These are cacti that are in Mexico and in Peru, and then there's iboga in West Africa, and ayahuasca is the most famous as one as well. And so it's the very highest consciousness of this plant that is the one that is directing the experience and working. Now, there are other plants as well that can be auxiliary helpers, and when one is training in this tradition, you actually take those plants in. And what you're asking from a particular plant, it could be rose, it could be eucalyptus, it could be, in Europe it could be oak. There are other plants that are not necessarily psychoactive. They're not necessarily going to give you visions, but they have knowledge to impart. And you take that in and you make a contract or a compact with that plant. You say, look, I want knowledge, I want skills, and I'm willing to sacrifice something as payment in a way. What can I give you? I can give you my discipline. I can sacrifice my senses. I can deny myself my senses. I can purify myself in order to create an environment where you can come in and you can actually become one of my allies. You can actually stay with me and teach me from the inside. So when you diet with a plant, you take out salt and sugar. You take out spices. And also your behavior changes. You are sexually inactive with other people, yourself, and you tend to become very isolated. So you're really creating this fertile environment where the actual energy of the plant can come into you and work over time, like a week or 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, and establish itself and teach you through dreams. There's direct connection. So when you have a connection with one or more plants in this way, that you have developed a relationship with them, you know them, they know you, they can teach you, then when you sing, what you're singing with is not just your personal voice, but there's an energy in the voice that you sing with. The energy is of that plant. And that's what really is making a particular shaman who works in this tradition powerful. The more plants they've got deep relationships with, the more powerful their voice, not in terms of volume, but in terms of direct power. Because when it's connected with ayahuasca, then it's a whole churning of removing things that don't help you anymore. Like this, the energy can go into your body and another person's body and start to activate the healing process and start to take out things that don't belong.
So it's a form of healing on a deep level that, we're really maybe not conscious of at all.
Absolutely. What the plant, when you work with ayahuasca, it looks directly inside you. And that first experience I had where it scanned me, is looking inside you. You can see where you come from.
Yeah.
You can see your ancestral time, your ancestral lineage. You can see where you are now. You can see your childhood. You can see your future potentiality. You can see you at a archetypal level, like your highest blueprint that you could possibly be manifesting at. And it can also see what prohibits you from manifesting your fullest potential.
Wow.
It could be self-doubt. It could be negative thinking. It could be programming by other people. It could be low self-esteem. It could be a tremendous range of different things. Now, what I tell people is what the medicine does, it looks at those certain kind of blocks and it helps you to remove them. It can help you to actually release those. And as you release them, it's a little bit like the chocks on an airplane. You take those chocks away, and that airplane can fly. Yeah. And what I'm really seeing is that over time, when people work with the medicine, not just once, but a few more times, they start to remove the obstacles to their manifesting their fullest potential, and they begin to transform and become really powerful individuals. That's the concrete results I'm seeing. I'm seeing people that are, I don't see people as lesser than me or that I'm their teacher. I see people as my co-mentors.
Yeah.
At a certain point, they're going to be activating their potential, and suddenly they're going to be teaching me, their skill sets and their knowledge, and it's just an amazing, joyful experience to see people transform over time.
I suppose you are creating now your own community of people, from your experiences from the Amazon, and now you seem to be going out into, all around the world.
Basically, yes.
And connecting with people and healing people.
Yes.
With the medicine.
So I don't decide what's going to be healed. My function is to hold a very, very powerful space where healing can occur.
Mm.
We work to create a sacred space that is energetically very protected, and that things can emerge as healing processes. So there are people who say, I could brew this. It's not difficult to brew, given. But the challenge is to know the experience and to have that connection with the plant so that you can guide successfully. A certain process can emerge that are very powerful for an individual, and if the person sitting with them hasn't got the experience or the connection, it can be a little traumatic for a person to go through that.
I'd like to just say that my own personal experience is, I had ayahuasca 4 months ago now, and I'm very aware that when you're in the midst of that, even though there was no time in that where I was frightened, I always felt I was being held. It was truly probably the most profound night of my life, to say the least. But I was aware and thankful that you were there, because there was a sense of you got my back. You were there just to hold it.
Definitely.
And because of that, I could just allow myself, I could surrender more and allow more work to be processed. So knowing your background and having taught you before the ceremony, I was comfortable in myself. But it was a real profound experience.
Mm.
I think what is amazing is the fact that Robert's, you originally from London. You were born in the UK. Is that
born
right?
in the UK,
Robert?
that's right.
And you made our experience very personal, because we actually got to hang out, and so and you got to know us on a personal level also. I suppose there's maybe a lot of charlatans out there, maybe in the Amazon.
Oh yes, there are a lot of domestic Peruvian Peru, because it is actually in terms of what they can earn, it's a huge chunk of money.
Yeah.
If a gringo comes in and is willing to drop $100 for a ceremony, that's like a month's wages in one evening. And if there's several people willing to drop that, then there's a big incentive to say, yeah, I can do this.
Yeah.
And the problem is that a lot of people have not done the training, have not got a connection with the plants, do not know what to do when the proverbial hits the proverbial. So it counts for something. So the key thing is to have word of mouth recommendations, that you actually know somebody.
And it's important to mention that our experience of ayahuasca is very positive, but that there has been sensationalized stories where things have gone wrong in the middle of the jungle. I mean, and people have drank and then they've wandered into the forest by themselves and they've died, or they've had a mixture of other things, or they've not been really cared for, so they've had other drugs that have mixed with it as well. So there is sensationalism, and that's usually the way it gets to the front page.
Yes,
it never gets to the front page saying ayahuasca's healed this person, it's allowed this person to become more confident, and instead of having 10 or 20 years of psychotherapy, they've suddenly become, it's never that.
Remember what Bill Hicks said, and in other news today, someone became enlightened. LSD.
Yeah. And
you never hear that, right?
And it's true, and I think a lot of fear can be based around any transformation, like San Pedro or any of these ceremonies that help you move forward, because of the way the press is reporting it. So it's important to get a rounded view of this as well, and this is hopefully what we're trying to do with this podcast.
And also we've lost this awareness that plants are sacred. Instead, we have demonized plants. The plants that have the ability to transform consciousness that now become suspect, as if they are inherently. I mean, would the divine create an illegal plant? I mean, please, the concept is ridiculous. You know,
Well, you think though, how many look at Starbucks? That's based on coffee
and sugar.
It is sacred, and that does come across when you actually experience it. But from somebody outside of the experience, it's easy to allow judgment to come into it and say, "Oh, people just hug trees," and until you actually experience it, it's a completely different thing.
Just slightly getting off topic, talking about the power of plants. There's a lot of media coverage now, especially on the internet, of the power of cannabis and cannabis oil in regards to a lot of people with cancer. And it contains an active ingredient called cannabinoids, which has a dramatic effect on reducing cancer growth in the body. It's not just maybe the power of ayahuasca, but it's the power of a lot of other plants, which has the capacity to heal.
Absolutely, and once you've experienced that, then you realise that the official propaganda that's being given out is somehow not correct. When there are many people that are they can have a smoke of marijuana and function very well. The lie is that you take a toke and then suddenly you're a screaming heroin addict. It's just a slippery slope. This is absolute rubbish. So and it kind of lumps them all together. So in a sense, what was really interesting actually is that, and when Brazil was debating whether to legalize ayahuasca, because it already had existing churches, like this syncretic church that used African elements and Catholic elements, and we're using the ayahuasca as a sacrament. They had been in existence for 40, 50 years. And the people that went there were, very, very pillars of the establishment. They were bankers, lawyers, accountants, or teachers, all that kind of thing. When they went to church regularly, every 2 weeks they would drink ayahuasca. And so the Brazilian government in the mid-80s was like, well, what should we do? Because, technically speaking, the Americans want us to, have created this document, the drove the creation of the 1971 treaties on psychotropic substances, and in which DMT was banned, and also consequently ayahuasca. But the Brazilians said, look, on the ground we have lots of churches and lots of people. What should we do? Should we legalize it? So they actually did a study. They did a study on long-term usage of ayahuasca within these communities, and they discovered two things. Because you can only ban something if it's got no social function or any medical function. And they discovered that people were very engaged in their communities. They were really, really, active participants in building community. And secondly, long-term usage, people who used ayahuasca compared to control groups that didn't, actually had, and the quote-unquote, enhanced cognitive performance. In layman's language, they were smarter. They were smarter than so ayahuasca makes you smart, basically.
There you go, let's all drink ayahuasca.
How many times have you actually taken ayahuasca, would you say?
I've lost count.
And you sat here and you're very normal. There's no side effects as I can see. And
you can't see the ticks.
No, I can't
on
see
radio.
No.
No, I mean, and that belies.
Because you drink it every ceremony as well, don't you?
Every ceremony I participate, because I have to be in the same vibrational space as everybody else. I have to be feeling it through, and I have to have the connection to the plant.
So can we talk a little bit about the ceremony? Because I noticed you use, is it tobacco as well?
As well, yes.
And just guide us through the procedure of a ceremony.
Okay.
What would people expect to experience during the first ceremony?
Okay, so the way I conduct ceremonies is slightly different. There's an additional element that I always do, which is before the ceremony starts. There's a briefing, and in the briefing we talk about the historical context of working with plants, and the next section talks about the timeline, what they can expect over time. It lasts about 5 hours, and I tell them what's going to happen at what point, and I explain why I want them to sleep over in the space, and then in the morning we'll debrief. And then the third part, I talk about navigation skills, how they can best surf the experience, what to expect, how does it work. And so that briefing itself is very valuable, because it gives people a heads up, and it kind of calms their fears. And like I say, look, you are walking into the unknown the first time you do it, but there are certain skills you can definitely deploy. And then basically we as a group, we collectively create sacred space, because that's also about stating intention and focus. And then I will begin to activate the medicine. I'll begin to communicate with it and ask it for its help, its participation. And then I dispense it. And then after that, It takes about 25 minutes for it to start to work, and sometimes nothing happens. They feel heavier. It doesn't seem to be happening. Then they try to move, and they feel that they can feel the real power coursing through them. After an hour and a half, I call for a second cup. So for some people, they need a bit more in order to do deeper work. And then towards the end of the ceremony, I'll draw a ceremony to a close. That's when most people are coming to the end of their journey and are much more lucid. We then sleep over, and in the following morning, the most important thing is the debrief in the morning, because then we get to share experiences, and then in that way one realizes how intelligent this medicine is. Because if you take a standard drug like marijuana or LSD, you're going to have very, very similar processes and experiences to the next person. When you do but the range of experiences that you get with ayahuasca is so unique to who you are. It can read you, and it gives you what you need. It gives you totally the experience that you need. So for some people that can be very physical, some people that can be a lot of downloading of information, etc., etc.
What was surprising to me, because I've never been to the drug scene. I've always I've been offered drugs, but I've always said no, and I've never, and I really don't consider ayahuasca, when people say it's a drug, I don't. To me, it is a medicine, and it is something that is sacred. And what surprised me, that when we did it, there was yourself and 4 others in the room, and it's like we were connected. It's like there were waves that we were connected, so we kind of all knew when the next thing was happening. Yes. And it was almost like there were strings attached. As you sung, I could feel the energy reacting within me to what you were singing. Yes. And Martin here was happily, and say purging usually means that either you're vomiting or you go to the toilet, and usually people have something to be sick into. And it's and some people purge more than others, and it was something that you did quite a lot of, didn't you, Martin?
Yeah, I think I was purging for everybody in the room at one stage, but there was there was a sense of real teamwork, and obviously Robert was holding the space and singing the Icaros, and it was, I mean, you talk about not maybe taking drugs throughout your lifetime, Trevor, and I actually have, I've right throughout my 20s, I've probably dabbled in quite a few substances, because I've always been very open-minded, and I'll try anything once, within reason. And so when I actually had an experience about 6 months before on psilocybin, which was the big game changer for me.
And psilocybin is what they find in mushrooms.
The mushrooms, yeah, big game change. I had the whole ego death and a lot of information which came through, and transcended maybe time and space, and it was something which was way beyond any experience I'd ever had with any other substances. I'd messed around with ecstasy, MDMA, cocaine, and ketamine as well. I was into the clubbing scene quite a lot throughout my 20s. So, but I realised I was always trying to actually look for something. I was always connecting, and I was always actually connecting to the deep house music. An avid fan of certain DJs, and they would play certain music, and it was because of the certain frequency that they were, firing the music at, and so I felt very connected throughout my 20s, maybe taking these drugs. But psilocybin was a massive game changer, and then obviously we had the opportunity to do ayahuasca, and the chain of events which brought Robert to Liverpool and to Planet Yoga is nothing but completely and utterly magical. And that we sat for 2 evenings, and on that second evening it was a night I'll never forget, because of a purpose of mine was actually to open up Planet Yoga and for the purpose of healing on so many different levels, and using yoga as a tool for people to heal, but then to actually go on a journey with ayahuasca and to experience something so unique and so amazing, which has had a massive effect on my life. I am deeply grateful.
So do you feel that and as Rob this as well, the ayahuasca is not just a one night hit wonder, it continues to work through the months, through the years, and is that what you're saying now? You're actually feeling that as a benefit as well?
Definitely. I had profound experiences on both evenings. I had a very similar experience to Robert's first time when he sat. It took me to a place where I feel like I'd come from, completely stripped me down, and it was a remembering of this is where I am from, and this is where the soul goes to, or the spirit, you know, when we die as such. And them experiences I've carried through to my own life and integrated them into my life on a daily basis, and it's inevitably made me, you know, more of a selfless person, more patient, you know, with you know, my family, certain friends, but it's just given me much more insight into who I am and why I'm here and what my purpose is this time around. So yeah, I've done some work with ayahuasca. I'm very excited to do, you know, some more deep work, because, you know, I believe in always trying to rediscover yourself and redefine yourself, and always trying to, you know, seek and to grow as a person, and never just to stand still, because maybe I think when we stand still, you know, we can get in this comfort zone, and it can maybe have a negative effect. What do you think, Robert?
Well, to stand still,
yeah, I mean, just, you know,
onwards and upwards, keep going.
Well, I think the experience is also, because some drugs are very solitary experience. Yeah. But what I found with the ayahuasca, it was that although it was solitary in some aspects of it, it was working on a deep personal level. Then there was a group dynamic where you felt you were part of a group, and I definitely felt a strong feminine energy, but a strong energy. Mm-hmm. When I say feminine, it doesn't mean that it's, you know, people think feminine and masculine, but it was equally, if not more, strong. Yeah. But then also a sense of humour, which I think is sometimes, although we're working hard, and I say working where you're processing things and everyone in that room is working hard, then all of a sudden there'd be just a ripple of humour that would come through. Yeah. And almost like for me at one point where it was making me like put my head in the bucket at one point, which I didn't even want to do, but I felt like it did it just to the message there underneath it was to not take myself so seriously. Yeah. But then as we did that, then we'd all be aware of the next wave of work that was coming in, and we'd get serious again. Yeah. So it is, you are aware of an intelligence. Definitely. That is, it's like a strong mother that is. Well,
it was definitely, and there was a sense of brotherhood right throughout. You know, the evening, and
bonding as well.
Yeah, there was a massive bond, and having you there, Robert, you know, to hold that space, and it, again, as Trevor said before, is it allows you to let go, you know, let go throughout the ceremony, and let the medicine do what it needs to do. So
that's key, actually, this idea of surrender, because you know, if you really want to go in deep, you have to let it do what it needs to do. Yeah. And so that means stepping, you know, aside with your ego and allowing this thing, because essentially, I mean, I describe this to the journey as I say, you're entering the mysterium tremendum, you're entering the greater mystery. Within you are the secrets of the universe, the secrets of creation. You already have that within you, but if you want to discover them, you have to let go of what you think you know and be taught properly.
I think the most important, the one thing when I realised, one moment that I realised that you were directly connected, it was one moment I'd just gone through a big working session, and you said, have you had enough yet? And I said, I don't know if you remember, I said, have you had enough? And it was hard work, and I went, and it just stopped, and I went, no, give me more. And then you just carried on, and whatever you did, just more came in. So I knew that you were always kind of holding things back there. You were in control, so you could have either ended the work there, or you could have continued it. So that was really important. Like the medicine was working through you and dispersing out through all of us. Yeah.
What I found amazing as well is when Robert, you know, you singing the Icaroses, there was different levels of the songs that, as you were singing, and when we needed more deep work, then the Icaros became more aggressive. And then, you know, empowered definitely, and then when you felt like it was time to bring things down, then, you know, the singing became very much more mellow and soft in the voice, but also you had the English interpretation to a lot of the songs, and that really helped throughout the ceremony. And I suppose having you as an Englishman, that personal touch was nothing but amazing, because people, I suppose, can go to the Amazon. And maybe not connect with the shaman. You know,
people do talk about the difficulty of, and because they speak Spanish, and you may not understand anything they're talking about. So that's why I really try and give it that personal touch in the morning when we debrief. It's really that opportunity to ground your experience, because in a sense it's very much a Alice in Wonderland experience.
Yeah.
You're going through the looking glass into a different universe or different potentials, and it can seem dreamlike and it can seem ephemeral and ethereal, and by coming together and sharing our stories, we ground it, and we also jog each other's memories. Oh yeah, that happened to me. Oh, how could I forget that? So it's really a very important part of the reintegration. You know, sometimes it's a very disintegrative experience, and then that's why the follow up in the morning is important. Now I do travel, and with those people who journey with me, I say, look, no matter where I am in the world, if you ever need me, I will be there at the end of that.
Yeah, that was important actually, because there was a few moments post ceremony that it was nobody else, because it's quite a lonely space when you go through this sort of transformation, and you tend to stick to your group of people you experienced it with, and there's questions that you need to ask, and if they don't know, then it's like, oh, I need to ask somebody. Because when I went back, I was, as they said, you're not the same person, and I said, thankfully I'm not. And so it was good to be able to contact you and say, look, I've got this question, I've got this question, I've got this question, and you were straight back there, and that was really important for me. So I think that's another good reason to find a shaman that can support you as well, not just on the night, but also answer your questions
post
before.
ceremony support. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not your typical 9-to-5 job, this, is it? Do you ever get? I know you're passionate about it, I can see, and I know it's your purpose and your calling, but do you ever think, I haven't got the energy to do this tonight? Do you ever get days like that?
Well, I mean, my teacher, Don Enrique, just says, you have to be prepared to suck it up at any time. If someone is calling for it, you need to be that, and that's the mark of having a training, because you are taught how to, under any circumstances, you have to be available and respond and pull it. I mean, there are times when I'm tired, but as soon as I've drunk that first cup, I'm on. Yeah. And I'm there. So that's all that matters, really. And I have to do my best. Every time. It's really beautiful work. It's inspiring. It's connecting to nature at a deep level. And what's really amazing is to see the transformations, to see the potential unlocking, and to see people just blossom, and become who they truly are. Oh, it's beautiful.
So why do you think that this is not mainstream then? Why do you think it's the governments or in different countries all over the world are not allowing this to become? If it's so effective, which it obviously is, why is it not being allowed? And
there are lots of vested interests already in the healing industry in terms of medicine. There's a guy called Dr. Gabor Mate, and he's a Hungarian doctor who works in Canada, and he was working in Downside. I think it's called Downside in Vancouver, just the most hardcore area of heavy drug usage. High mortality rates. I mean, we're talking about people using crystal meth and heroin, etc., etc. And he was like a community doctor there for 12 years, working with that kind of frontline medicine, and over the years and his observation of all those hardcore addicts, they realized that one thing, you can talk about substance abuse, and he just said, this is all surface, because what links all these addicts, is tremendous trauma, and they're self-medicating, and then he was introduced to ayahuasca, and he went, wow, this is amazing, and he tried to really introduce the addicts to the ayahuasca, and it can be used in a way to remove the driver of that addictive behavior. And he was getting great results. But then the Canadian Medical Board just said, if you keep proselytizing and becoming evangelical about this, we're going to have to strip you of your license to practice medicine. And we need to do studies, etc. He said, look, it's been used for thousands of years. How many years of studies do you need? It works right here, right now. We can save lives. And yet, so there was extreme resistance to the medicine on that institutional front. And there's a lot of fear for them, because if the pharmaceutical industry depends on not necessarily curing people but maintaining them as customers, essentially. So if you have people who are depressed and need to have your antidepressive medicines for a long term, that's an income stream that they can depend on and go rich on.
And also the other side of it, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by a long shot. I've met a lot of people who are, but when you are exposed to this sort of experience, it does make you question other things, and then the things that you used to just take for granted, like the news headlines and like just consumerism and eating junk food, you suddenly stop and question. You're thinking, this is not what I need to be doing. So if lots of people were doing that, and I mean questioning things, and suddenly, not eating the food and not just following the rules like we're supposed to do, then suddenly that could cause a lot of problems as well. So
that's exactly what happened in the mid-60s with the American government. What LSD was ostensibly the people who conceived it, like Aldous Huxley, really thought it should be something for the elite, that they were the only people who should have access to it. Then along comes Timothy Leary, and he's an evangelist and say everybody should do this, and it did provoke this huge wave of LSD consumption that did exactly what you said, that it changed perceptions and it changed behaviors, and it worried the establishment tremendously that their reaction was to shut it down completely, not just access to it, but research into it. And when you have politics affecting scientific research, you know that there's an agenda there, definitely, because there was no reason to shut down scientific research if they were open about it. So yes, maybe it's a threat in terms of it's a medical threat, but we can continue to research. No, every single avenue was shut down. It was constituted a threat. Now, after that, they said to themselves, well, this, because you had also the anti-Vietnam War movement, which was coupled to that consciousness raising, and then it began to spill out to all kinds of raising of consciousness, which worried the establishment. So they began to review the legislation that they had and realized that the legislation they had from the 30s was hopelessly outdated. And so they basically said, what can we do to make sure that we have every single thing we can possibly think of that are actually included in some kind of legislation, including future things. And that's why they drew up the 1971 Convention on Psychotropic Substances and engaged everybody around the world to say these are the things that we cannot allow to have people to have access. Because I do think there was this fear that if people begin to wake up, they won't participate as consumers. They won't buy into the things that they're being told to buy into. And that's a definite risk to the bottom line at the end of the day. I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but institutions definitely have momentums and have ways of working. I
can appreciate that. I mean, I've worked with is a consciousness expert called Tom Campbell, and he's well known in the areas of science, and he's worked for NASA, and he works a lot in quantum physics, and he also has been going out of his body for 30 years. And I was saying to him, why don't you this is amazing what the experiences that you had. Now he's done it without taking anything, but he's still got to the same conclusions. And he said the problem is that a lot of scientists won't take this on board and won't stick their hand up and say, we're doing this sort of work and we found this, because they don't get government grants, they don't get funding, and the people that should give them money, suddenly they close them down. So even
that may be shifting now.
I think it is.
2 years ago I went to a conference in Oakland called Psychedelic Science, looking at all the science that's being done on psilocybin and MDMA, and there are protocols being developed and there are research programs, and there's an opening of that consciousness to say, let's really be more scientific about looking at what the positive benefits are of using these things.
But I think that's the next, like we had the Industrial Revolution, I think that's what's happening now, and I think as quantum science comes together with neuroscience and consciousness studies and shamanism and everything else, all gets to the same results and the same answers. That's the next consciousness shift, the next shift for the planet. But it seems, I think, with the internet now, people are connecting.
Yeah.
Little groups become bigger groups, and all over the world. And like your work is taking you all over the world. So it's little lights that are going on. Eventually, the balance will tip. So but going back to the fact that when somebody does awaken, it is quite a lonely place, because suddenly the friends and the family don't understand them. What advice would you give to someone who goes through an experience like ayahuasca and then comes out the other side thinking, wow, I'm not the person I thought I was, therefore, my life's completely changed?
But usually it's for the better, because you're letting go of things you don't need, or you're letting go. What's ironic about ayahuasca is that it's classified as a hallucinogen. But it's a hallucinogen that dispels illusion. It's visionary medicine, definitely, but it will dispel the illusions that bind you that are not true. And if that means that you have to update your the way you are in the world, then that's all for the benefit of the greater good, I think. You know, that, I mean, make no mistake, that is the agenda of the medicine. It is to heal us at a deep level, and it is to transform us so that we can become more aligned with the logic of nature and the demands of nature, not this abstract little universe that we've created for ourselves. Human rules, human concepts. It doesn't have any bearing to do with.
So if you were sat with with yourself, a former you, 15, 20 years ago, what is different from you now to how you used to be? What advice would you give to the old self?
Keep going, mate. You're doing the right thing. You know, just you have to listen with your heart and for. Actually, my old self still did. The part of my way of being was that I did what I wanted to do. I didn't care about making money. You should be a banker, or you should have a stable job, because you never know security in old age. It's like, it didn't appeal to me. I've got to do what interests me. I've always been like that. And so I've always lived like that. So in a sense, more key to me is, what would my 12-year-old think of what I'm doing right now? I'm pushing nearly 50.
Yeah.
My 12 would be like, go for it, mate.
You're
absolutely
doing a good job. Keep up the
on.
cool work. I think as society, we are programmed to be afraid, and we are programmed to be ignorant.
And that's the major thing that people actually release, is deep levels of programming and fear. Fear. It's embedded in our tissue. It affects the way we think. It affects the way we are in the world. Our behavior is predicated on, like, look at the advertising. You are a useless human being unless you buy our product.
And then build people up to say, the latest thing. This is amazing. This actor's amazing. This person's amazing. Then they spend the time breaking it down again. Or the headlines are there to instill fear.
Or go to the States and just watch the advertising. It's just insane.
Yeah.
How much fear is coming through, how much programming is actually embedded.
And you become more aware of this once you've gone through this process. Then.
The scales fall from one's eyes, in whatever way that is, and whatever way it needs to be. Definitely. There is an awakening. I mean, that's perhaps why, we were talking about conspiracy theory. Well, a lot of the actual suppliers of the vine, the ayahuasca vine, that are selling to communities who want to make the medicine, are finding that their ability to access PayPal and their ability to access credit cards are shutting them down. Now, if it was one thing, that would be one thing, but it's a whole number of herbal vendors who are being shut down, and that's more like a top level thing. There are certain people who are feeling very threatened by the rise of ayahuasca.
Is the awakening a ripple effect of things like ayahuasca, or is it also, they talk about the age of Aquarius in the greater cosmos?
It's hard to disengage and say what is what. I mean, it just...
But it is your awakening, so, just go with it.
What's really interesting is that certain of those ideas from the 60s that were seen as cranky or extremely far out are now mainstream. Vegetarianism, for example, the idea of ecology and protecting the environment. Those values are pretty replacing what was just hardcore materialism. So they would say almost we're seeing the benefit of it needed to go underground and be assimilated, but it's now surfacing, and those aren't controversial ideas anymore.
There is a saying that somebody once said, is that those who don't believe, there's never enough proof, and those that do believe, they don't need proof. And I think it's a point of, at some point you've got to, once you have some experience, then it's about having faith and trusting the process and trusting there is a higher energy, and not being so arrogant to think that we are the top of the food chain, we are the top of every chain, because we're not.
It's important. I do encourage people to be skeptical when they engage with the medicine, because I really don't like necessarily those people who are in love with unicorns and fluffy kittens. It's
What's it with unicorns?
I'm giving them a hard time, but it's like, well, look, we are living in a physical universe, so we have to have some kind of balance. And I just say to people, look, don't believe anything I have to say. Go with your experience. Let your experience be your teacher, because once somebody has direct knowledge, then there is their own personal connection, and that's what they can learn and work with to transform from within and without. And what often happens is that they begin to make small changes in the way they are in the world, and those small changes cumulatively end up being large behavioral changes, and people see this and they go, oh my goodness. For example, a lot of people report that suddenly they are just not attracted to smoking cigarettes anymore. because their vibration is shifted, and that relational vibration is no longer the same, and they can look at it just go, there's no pull anymore, or they stop drinking dead. It's just like, this is not useful for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had many reports of that.
But it's related to junk food. You know, it's people just look at certain foods. You know, whether it's greasy burgers, chips, you know, pizzas, and not wholesome foods, and you just realise that it's not serving you in any capacity.
So if it awakens a more discriminatory nature, like saying, or the ability to judge more critically what is good and what is not so good, I don't think that's a bad thing.
So on a metaphysical level then, what do you think ayahuasca does? Does it raise your vibration? Is that how you think it works?
It connects you directly. It reawakens your connection to the greater mystery. You know, in essence, there are all these quantum possibilities of consciousness that suddenly are become online, are online suddenly for you. It's a little hard to talk metaphysically. Let me just talk about what it does on a very concrete physical level. When we operate in the everyday world, we have our brain is at a certain frequency. This is usually the beta frequency. There are a variety of frequencies: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, theta, and there are certain speeds. Now, to operate in the ordinary world, to cross the road, to do our bills, etc., we need to be in beta. Now, if we want to go into healing mode, we step down into theta. Now, theta is that borderline between awakeness and sleeping. It's just that very thin line between when you fall asleep and when you're awake, or as you regain consciousness. But actually, there's a lot of potential in being in that bandwidth of brainwave frequency, in that there's where the healing can happen. Now, simultaneously, what happens with ayahuasca is that it shifts your hemisphere dominance from the left to the right. So now you're stepping down in frequency and you're mostly in the right hemisphere, and that's where the potential for unleashing or accessing the traumas that we've experienced happens, and a reconfiguration can happen. Ironically, studies done by Robin Cartwright at the Imperial College in London on psilocybin have revealed that they've done MRI scans, have revealed that there are these, whilst the common languages have, these are mind expanding substances, what is actually very interesting is that there are, under MRI scans, the neural networks, the main central networks, actually within the brain that determine a sense of identity, shut down. So there's actually a mind contraction thing, or the identity contraction. The identity contracts, but simultaneously that allows for new possibilities to emerge, new areas of the brain to actually start awakening their functionality and to operate and make new connections. So in a sense, it's about unraveling the narrative of self that is, that you've lived with for so many years, and allowing new selves, new possibilities, new potentials to emerge and establish connections. So it's an expansion of possibility that's really at the forefront of this work.
One question is because I know people who have taken mushrooms, and they're saying when you've got to set up the right environment and the intent is important behind it. I also know psychotherapists that are using MDMA now, but they're using MDMA as a popular drug that people use for clubbing and but used in a psychotherapy context, it's opening different areas, but that's going with that intent and that purpose. So do you also advise that when you go into a ceremony that you have a specific intent? Does that help, or is it good just to go, just surrender and do the work?
Intention is beautiful if you have a specific theme that you want to work with, but because the awareness of the plant spirit of ayahuasca is so high, in terms that it can see beyond this dimension, it can see beyond this 3D frame, it can see what you actually need. Okay, because let's say you're in the valley, you right now are in a valley. What can you see? You can only see the valley. But the spirit of the medicine is right at the apex of a mountain, and it can see for hundreds of miles. It can see into all the nooks and crannies of the valleys, and it can see everything. So sometimes, you may say, I want X, but the medicine can look at you and say, actually, you may want X, but actually what you really need right now for your maximum development is Y, and you'll get Y. So it's good to have a focus in order to really have a centering point, but the ability to flow and drop, that agenda, if you're presented with a different direction, is very important. Now, what's also important to realize is that the initial experiences can be very discombobulating, because you don't really understand what's going on. You're being led, you're being taken on a journey, and certain things can happen. Let's say in ceremony 2 something happens, doesn't make any sense. Why did I see this animal in my vision? Why did this happen? And then maybe in session 10 the penny drops. You go, oh my goodness, I understand why that was sequenced like that, or why that had to be just there, in that layer, because there is a huge arc of trajectory of development and positioning of events and phenomena that doesn't necessarily make sense when you have limited data collection. You have data, only 2 data points or 3 data points. You need many more in order for the patterns to emerge and for the understanding. For me personally, it was like that. It was many patterns, many ceremonies, and thereafter I suddenly went, oh my God, 73! I completely get that crazy stuff that happened that didn't make any sense to my rational mind. It had an order. And then even bigger arcs of development. 3 years later, I just went, oh my God, it's not been what I thought it's about. It's actually about this huge cosmological level of development. It's like, oh my goodness.
And I suppose that's why ayahuasca is so important, because there is a guidance from the from the spirits of the plants, and it's different from maybe just ingesting DMT, which is the compound within the plants, which takes you on that journey as well.
Because if you smoke pure DMT, what you're doing is you're taking the refined active ingredient, but you don't have the intelligence associated with the ayahuasca to help guide you. So you can be propelled into this random realm, and just random crazy stuff is happening. You may be exposed energetically to being compromised energetically, like parasites can actually then come into the space. And you have no idea what it means. Whereas the ayahuasca is much more slow acting, but much wiser in terms of where it takes you and what it does with you. So I personally have been offered DMT, pure DMT, and I do not want to take it, because in that context it's not done as in a sacred space, and it's not done as a medicine, and it's not done with the intelligence of the plant spirit guiding. Now that to a listener may just that idea of a plant spirit teaching you can seem very woohoo-ish or new agey or hippie-ish or whatever, but it's a real phenomenon. There really is an intelligence behind it.
I can honestly say I have smoked DMT 2 or 3 times, and it's something that is very much out there, and I couldn't get my head around at all. And then the last time I did this smoke DMT, I had a very frightening experience, and it put me in a loop as such, and so I came out, and it really did shake me up, and we didn't set up sacred space, and I suppose we did slightly use it maybe as for recreation, and it's something I wouldn't do again. Having the conversations we've had about DMT now, but there is quite a theme going around the cities of accessing DMT, and people are smoking it recreational.
I'm sure.
So do you think it'll have a positive effect or a negative effect
on the people that are smoking DMT?
Yeah.
It depends what they experience.
Yeah, of course.
They can experience amazing teachings and lessons as well, but there's a potential risk. I mean, Rick Strassman was the first person to get FDA approval. I think it was FDA or DEA, or probably both of them in the States, approval to conduct studies in the DMT. And what was remarkable was the consistency of narratives that were generated by subjects who didn't know each other. And often there was like this propelled into this space, and just as they reach this space, there are alien beings waiting, going, oh yes, another one, great, let's operate and do whatever or put implants. And these people that reported this didn't know each other and came out with consistent stories. So there's definite risks in doing that. I would never ever do that.
And there's also things on Netflix now. There is
DMT, the spirit molecule, with Joe Rogan.
DMT, the spirit molecule, which is a very it's a very interesting program, but there's also information about ayahuasca also on Netflix.
Is it? What was it called?
It's about ayahuasca, the Spirit of the Vine, I think.
Oh, Vine, that's a very good documentary.
Yeah, it is actually. So for anyone who's got Netflix or is interested about learning about these things, they can be accessed obviously through the internet, but Netflix.
Definitely.
I think what ayahuasca does is that, well, for me, it took me to the top of the mountain. It helicoptered me right to the top of the mountain, showed me the view, showed me how clear the air was, and then it took about 3 or 4 weeks for me to not get back down to base camp, but I was a little bit higher than base camp. But then it made me want to climb. So for me,
it showed you the topography, right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
And so, I mean, people, I've never tried DMT myself, and I probably never would, actually. I don't feel like I need to now, especially after your scary experience. But I think for some people, I think the way to go is through natural ways and meditation and good diet. But I think for some people, just to have that glimpse of that paradigm shift to go, wow, God, this is real.
It changes everything.
Yeah, it's enough for them to go, well, actually, I will look into this now. Maybe I have been closed-minded before. So... but I agree with it. I think DMT sounds like it's a rocket that just gets propels you out there with no navigation, no
protection.
With ayahuasca's got Houston control and backup sat navs and everything. It's all there waiting for you to guide
and
you.
a knowledge base. And also, what was really amazing with my first time with that Peruvian shaman is that as I lay there, I listened to these songs. I could hear the melody, and I could hear what she was singing, but there was a sense that streaming down within the melody was this connection to a lineage, that there was secret information embedded in that song that was being communicated directly to me, like a university, level 101 course being just dumped into me through that song. So when people have connection to a lineage of teachings and a tradition, then when they come into ceremony and they facilitate that, they are representatives of that, and that really does make a big difference. How do you distinguish between a good facilitator and somebody? Well, it's the training, it's the depth of training, it's the experience. You look at their legs, have they been chomped up by mosquitoes? It's a good indication, because there are some people go, I just put a CD on. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You have no connection sonically to the realms. You can't channel anything in. You can't support that space. Putting a CD, there's no intentionality. When I sing, there is definite intention to do something with that energy. I'm moving it around. So if anybody puts on a CD for the whole duration, back away. That's not somebody who knows what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, a question I've got about I've noticed in some of the artwork. A lot of the artwork that's inspired by ayahuascan experiences, there's archetypes in there, like jaguars and the snake. And so how would you explain that? Are they manifestations of ayahuasca? Are they or are they
the snake is multiple, and the snake is the spirit of the medicine on one level, because if you look at the vine, it's very serpentine way. It wraps itself around, entwines itself around a branch. But also there is the cosmic serpent. There's a level of which is Jeremy Narby talks about this motif that repeats through history of the serpent and DNA. He says that represents life, as the spirit of life itself coming through the cosmic serpent. The jaguar as a character, it can be a protector, and it can come in when you most need it to come in and to do some serious industrial level cleansing. You can call upon the jaguar and say, help me, I just need to take this darkness out. And it loves transforming darkness into light, comes in and mulches it. So for me personally, I have the feeling, one of my downloads was that, who are these beings? It's like, they are the guardians of nature. They have signed a pact to watch over nature and to watch over humanity and to help to guide us and to help, really help us to actualize who we are, to remember who we truly are. Because that's a great theme in this work. There's a sense of remembering when you enter that space and go, I know a lot of this already. Yeah. And to really dive into that and dispel the illusions.
So why do you think we forget?
Well, I don't want to get into that in this program.
There's a whole new hour. There's another hour.
I think there's a very esoteric dimension to this work about a secret history of humanity and what's really happened. And that's as much as I'm going to say, because I think it's for every single person who journeys to discover this in their own time, when they're ready to discover and dive deeper. Because this is why this is extraordinarily fascinating, because there's no end to the greater mystery. There are layers and layers and levels of knowing and understanding, and it's inexhaustible. Inexhaustible. But let me just put it this way: if you can have multidimensional experiences, what does that imply? it implies that you are a multi-dimensional creature. You are not just a 3D creature. When you can go into these realms and you can see, that means your true nature is not what we think it is. It's not what we've been taught it is. You know, we truly are magical, divine beings. We are children of creation, children of divinity.
And you find that once you've had the first experience, it's exponential. The knowledge comes quicker and quicker, or synchronistic events happen.
It's not linear. Synchronicities can often occur, very much so. And if you're more aware, you can become more aware of those, and then you can capture them more quickly as they happen. Some certain number sequences can start to unfold.
I mean, just leading up to this week, I do get synchronicities, and I think when I first had my experience on the psilocybin, it actually told me that you know, the universe has been trying to communicate with me for a long time, and I just haven't been open to the signs and open to listening. And now I'm, you know, it's not all about me. I'm just here, you know, for a purpose, and I do listen to the signs, and there are many signs, and they can come in many different forms. And just this week, I tend to get numbers, and I've had numbers come in threes, and I had on 4 separate occasions. Now it actually happened today. I've had the number 333 come
today as well.
Today as well.
Wow.
Today as well. So. You know, I was in Tesco last week, and you know, you're at the till, and so it's funny because you think, shall I buy that item? Shall I not buy that item? And then you actually end up getting to the till, and the bill was £3.33, and I was like, okay, I do get numbers, but I haven't had 333 before. This was on a Thursday, and then the next day, I was in the car, and there was a car in front of me, and you know, license plate 333, and I go, okay, that's the second time. What's all this about? And then I was in Asda on Sunday doing some shopping, and the bill comes to £13.33. And just today, a really, really good friend of mine texted me today, it was £13.33 when she texted, and I'm just like, yeah, this is it. So a lot of numbers and a lot of synchronicities, and the universe is always talking to us.
Yeah, you were telling me on Facebook the other day, and I was telling you about, I've had the same thing the last few weeks of 11:11. Yeah. 11:11. As I'm typing it, I press send, and then he said seen. You just read it at 11:11.
Yeah, that was the day, wasn't it? Yeah. But you've been getting a few hearts, is that right?
Hearts, yeah. I got been seeing hearts for the last week. I told somebody to be a heart over the shoulder. I mean, actually, a real heart. I mean, I'd see some card or something with it on. And I kept seeing it, and then I had which I won't go into, but I had a profound experience a few days ago, which was all about healing the heart. And I'm coming from a very sceptical point of view. I've always been quite sceptical about things, but I've changed dramatically. So I don't think that the universe can give you the answers, but I think it can nudge you in the right direction. I think it's allowed to do that. It's a game. It doesn't spoil the game. It just allows you to give you a little hint every now and then.
I think sometimes it is important just to set your intention and send it out to the universe, and then the universe does tend to respond on an energetic vibrational level, and it doesn't tend to give you exactly what you want, but it gives you the tools to facilitate, you know, that intention as such.
So can I ask you, gentlemen, what you've actually received from the medicine? How's it changed you, or how's it affected you?
For me, I've received a lot of confirmation that the life I'm living is the life I'm meant to be living this time around. You know, I feel like I'm meant to have opened Planet Yoga. I'm meant to hold that space for people to heal themselves through yoga. I'm meant to, my life is about service, duty and responsibility this time around. And the medicine give me a lot of confirmation. So I do feel as if I am on the right path with my life. But also, you know, throughout my life I've had, you know, maybe a little bit of deep trauma, and with regards to possibly my mum and dad getting divorced, and you know, I fell out of touch with my mum, and the medicine, you know, it actually took me back to my mum's womb last time we were we were sitting, and it's things like that. It just offers great insight, and then it gives you a deep gratitude for, you know, you are actually here, you are breathing, and you can do something great with your life through the choices you make each day. So I've learnt many lessons, you know, along my journey, and ayahuasca has just been another stepping stone for my development. How about you, Trevor?
It's prior to ayahuasca, I've had the last 2 years or 3 years have been the worst of my life personally. Through divorce and loss and almost pretty much a nervous breakdown and losing everything, as I call it, losing. And it was the worst years of my life. And what ayahuasca did, it was actually, it's healed it, really. It's gone in there and it's healed it. I mean, at a deep level, not just at a superficial level, but actually the things that when I think about them now, I just look at them completely different, because I actually felt the energy go into my body, working inside my body. And I had to surrender and also shift a lot of my beliefs. A lot of my beliefs about myself and about my life and about the people around me were false. And so it's opened me up, and actually on the night itself, the information came through as a download, as I call it, a download. A download just feels like information just coming into your body, really. That's all I can explain it as. And this is a gift, and it's the gift of art. And since then I've been doing sacred geometry art, and that is now what my work is. I'm doing more art, and I've never done art in my life, and I suddenly start.
Really?
No, I've never done it. And
wow.
And I suddenly start. I've always done
that, right?
photography, but now I'm starting. I've set up a website called Sacred Visions, and
.co.uk.
yeah. And I'm drawn to studying sacred geometry, and I'm also getting direct contact as well. I feel like my energy systems have opened up to things that I didn't even believe, like chakras, and suddenly I find I can feel my chakras vibrating.
Isn't that ironic? It's so
speaking
funny.
fluent Indian, and I don't speak Indian, and it all makes sense.
Are you talking about Hindi? Or Sanskrit?
Sanskrit.
Okay, Sanskrit.
And yeah, Sanskrit, yeah. As if any
And
language.
that's a dead language, actually.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's too many coincidences, and there's still part of it that's critical.
Have you had verification that way? What you actually spoke?
Yeah.
Was?
I was lying in bed at 2:00 in the morning, suddenly speaking, saying Hari Bhakti, and I'm looking that up, and it's a 12th century Sanskrit document, and I've had numerous things that have happened like this. So it's opened my belief systems, it's opened my energy systems, it's made me I've not had an argument or anything in two years now. I'm just calm, relaxed, and people have met me since like a year ago and said, you're different, there's something about you that's different.
Definitely. I mean I've not seen you in 6 months, and you look expanded and you look full of light.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that your art is really, I think the value of what you're doing in terms of your art is you're bringing those experiences and those representations of what does exist at a higher level, and you're bringing it down in this 3D realm so that you can remind people and activate. Maybe there's a visual activation when they see it. It just something happens.
Yeah. And that is what my purpose is. I feel like it's my way of connecting back up to that higher vibration for people to look at that and go, that does something to me. I look at the art and I think that makes me feel so good. And the funny thing is when I'm doing it, I know when it's right and when it's not. So there'll be a bit of information, and I go, it's not finished. And then I'll come back the next day and there'll be something that'll come in, and I'll suddenly see it and I go, it's done now, and I can leave it. So that's what it's done for me, and it's opened up. It's exciting. It's really exciting because there's a whole new world now that's opened up, and connecting with like-minded people.
And that's the other thing, that in doing this work, one meets one's tribe.
Yeah.
The people that really are resonating at that level.
Definitely.
Tribe is a good word for it. Yeah. So what's your next big thing? Is there something that you'd really like to experience or achieve in the next few years?
I want to continue developing the communities globally. I want to go deeper into my training and really spend a lot of time dieting, and that's actually quite a tough proposition, being in deep jungle, and you just have to be by yourself and commune with the different plants. I want to up level in terms of because ultimately I want to do the best I can in terms of holding that space and activating people's healings. And if you ever meet somebody, so you want to know what how to distinguish somebody who's a good shaman and who's not, they have to have done that work. They have had to have,
in there and done it themselves.
blood, sweat, tears, purge. They have to have delved into their own darkness and healed their own woundings at the deepest level, because ultimately they can only take you as far as they've journeyed. If they haven't gone into the heart of darkness and really resolved those things, they can't hold that vibration, and therefore they can't activate that deeper healing for you. So I'm very aware. What's useful about that is that I can really truly relate to the spaces that people go to and the experiences they have, because I've been there as well. Yeah, definitely. So I just know. I know what's going on.
I know where he's been.
Yeah, and I know how bad it is. But I do say to everybody, I say under that phrase I come up with, I salute you for you are presenting yourself on the anvil where heroes are forged in drinking this. Because this is a threshold experience. This takes you to a whole new level of understanding and being in the world. And it is a very demanding thing to actually look deep into your own shadow, because if you really want to heal, you have to look at the things that you push away from your consciousness.
You have to face it.
Exactly. And that is a tough proposition.
Well, the purpose of this podcast, we talked about this, is that, we are believers. We're there. And... but it's to help people give a bit better understanding of the work you do, and also to perhaps, if they're curious, to answer some of their questions. And for those who've already experienced ayahuasca or San Pedro or any other things, it's just to reaffirm that it's they're on the right path, and there's other people like them that they can reach out to on the internet usually.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to write to me directly, they can drop me a line at spiritoftheamazon@gmail.com.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, I'd just like to wrap it up and say, we've actually recorded this podcast at my home tonight, and just to be thinking of actually having incredible people in my life like yourself, Trevor, and yourself.
Yeah, even your connection was because of
the connection is absolutely amazing, and that really gives me a sense of gratitude of how far I've come as a person. And it's amazing for me to hold that space for you two, also a Planet Yoga.
I'm very grateful.
Yeah, really. And just sitting here and we've actually become really good friends, all of us, and it's you really, when I'm a big fan of meeting new people and making new friends, and I think having that open mind has allowed me to become a much better person. But also, again, just to connect with some amazing humans, because there are some amazing people out there.
Absolutely.
And again, so I'm very, very grateful to be sitting here in this space with you two people, and I look forward to the weekend ahead. We've got a few days ahead of us of some work, and so I'm very excited.
I'm always excited to see what emerges. Absolutely, and it's a privilege and an honor to work with the medicine. I feel very fulfilled, and I feel it's really beautiful to be in service, and to witness people releasing things that have haunted them. It's a deep privilege to be witness to that, to bear witness to that. To see evolution in action. Wow.
So I suppose it's time to wrap it up. Is there any maybe books you would recommend for people to look into, Robert? Anything that you'd, on ayahuasca, or if people want to look for?
Yeah, I really want to return to that Vine of the Soul documentary, which is on Netflix and can be purchased as a download as well. It's a very good overview of the process and the intentions behind working with the medicine. A very good book that a friend recommended to me, and I'm glad I took up his recommendation because it really was beautifully expressed, is a book called Dark Night, Early Dawn, which is really, and the guy behind it, I forget his name right now, but you can find that on Amazon, Dark Night, Early Dawn. He's an instructor at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and he comes from comes from a theology background, but he spent the last 30 years doing holotropic breathwork, which is Stanislav Grof's modality of transforming consciousness. Plus, he's been a psychonaut for the last 30 years, but a very disciplined one. And he's saying, what can we learn from all these experiences? What does it really say about evolution? What does it really say about consciousness? So that's a really beautiful book that gives an overview generally, what are we doing with this work? It's not just a particular medicine. It's about really the whole, how it relates to human potential and evolution and transformation. So that's a great recommend. I would love to pass on.
Fantastic. Fantastic. How about you, Trev? You want to finish it on?
Well, I think just like to say thank you. I think it's been a great conversation, and what better way to actually end this podcast with the tones of Don Roberto singing a Nicaro. So I'll leave you with it, and thank you for listening.
I'll explain the Nicaro just before I start. This is really about a song of protection to start with, and a song inviting the work to happen, invite the healing work to do. But it's also, what's really interesting, it's about talking about going transdimensional, entering the realms of the sky and the waters, the oceans of multidimensionality, and communicating with the shamans that have been existing before, and asking for their help in order to reweave new patterns of power and beauty. So this is called Pana Yom Paribano. Panayom Paribano, Panayom Paribano, Panayom Paribano, Panayom Paribano, Panayom Paribano, Panayom Paribano. Yora Panayom Bano, Yora Panayom Bano, Pana Pana Shamangin, Pana Pana Shamangin, Pana Pana Shamangin, Pana Pana Shamangin. Panayon Tanakaya, Panayon Tanakaya, Paro Shaman Bababan, Paro Shaman Bababan, Paro Shaman Bababan. Babayon ta'ana, babayon ta'ana, Nai shaman bababan, Nai shaman bababan, Nai shaman bababan, Nai shaman bababan. Baba baba shamani, baba baba shamani, baba baba shamani, baba baba shamani. Baba baba shamani, baba baba shamani. Mato ashon yombano, mato ashon yombano, pa many ban, pa many man, pa many man, pa many ban. Honi meraya bukan, honi meraya bukan, kena kena shamankin, kena kena shamankin, kena kena shamankin, kena kena shamankin. Yora metza ayomban, yora metza ayomban, yora gu ayomban, yora gu ayomban, yora gu ayomban, yora gu ayomban. Hi shamanirama, hi shamanirama, hi shamanirama, hi shamanirama, hi shamanirama, hi shaman. Rama hi shamani, Rama hi shamani.